This talk that you're going to hear tonight is an evolution of something that I first did about 4 years ago for some work colleagues of mine. And when you're in a work environment and people find out that you do martial arts, you occasionally get a few funny comments like, "Oh, watch out around James, otherwise if you say something it's going to chop you," or something like that. And I took it all in good spirits, but I felt a need to just kind of educate people and just to explain what martial arts is and what it isn't, because most people's views of martial arts is largely influenced by what they see on TV and in the movies. And surprise, surprise, in real life it's not really like that at all. What is different about the talk that you're going to hear tonight is I had quite a radical change with my martial arts journey about 4 or 5 years ago, because I didn't really feel that what I was learning was going to be of much value to me if I ever found myself in a situation where I'd have to defend myself in some type of confrontational situation. And thanks to the likes of Jack and people like him in the practical karate community, I've learned a lot about not just how we can adapt martial arts to make them more applicable to those types of scenarios, but also the fact that self-defense and self-protection is a much broader subject that encompasses much more than just physical skills. Is everyone okay with that? Yeah. So, without further ado, a couple of introductions. So, I'm James, I'm a Wixford resident, been living in the village for about 3 years. My martial arts journey began a long time ago now, probably about 50 years ago when I was about 8 years old. So I grew up in Liverpool, in quite a rough neighbourhood, and my mum felt it was important that I should know how to look after myself. So she enrolled me in some judo classes at the local sports centre, did that for a few years, and then a friend of mine switched from judo to karate and I followed it. And I did that right up until the age of 18, until I left home and went to university, and that was where it stopped. University did have a karate club, but frankly, there were far more interesting diversions at college, mainly beer and women. So I've had long periods away from karate just because of, moving house, changing jobs, just life, right? But I've always gone back to it. I can't explain why, but I just really enjoy it. And I've been doing karate continuously now since about 2007. I took the decision to start again from a white belt, and I've worked my way back up through the ranks. And I'm currently a second down black belt in a style of karate called Shotokan, which is possibly the most popular style of karate in the UK currently. Jack, do you want to say a few words about your...
So hello, I'm Jack. I've been training since I was 7 years old, pretty much continuously. I haven't had a break. Started in karate, similarly to James, started in a club that was more so based around sport, wasn't really applicable to actual self-protection. But unfortunately, when you join at that age, you just assume everything is. You assume I'm punching things, therefore I must be learning how to look after myself. It doesn't work like that, and I'm sure we're going to go into more detail about that later. On top of that though, I've tried to mix and match and learn some other things too. I did about a year of Tai Chi, and I was like the youngest there by probably about 40 years. And I really enjoyed it, and it was really great fun. Loveliest people I've ever trained with. But once again, it was one of those things where I can understand why people were training with it and what it was good for, but for me it just wasn't what I wanted. I also did kickboxing for a couple of years because I wanted to hit people. I was like, go on, let's do a bit of that as well.
You just wanted to hit them in a slightly different way.
Yeah, it's like we hit them like that, we're going to hit them like this. Exactly, just have a bit of a play around and do some different things. But I've been teaching now for, probably coming up to 10 years. I started when I was a teenager just teaching in my local club. Basically they would just be like, Jack, take this kid, he needs to learn something. I'm like, great. And then over time I was like, you know what, I actually really enjoy the teaching side of things too. And I haven't really looked back. I opened my first club in 2020, great time to open a club.
And can we think what
that might have happened? Yeah, so it was training with masks and over Zoom and all that fun stuff. But after that, I started really finding what James was on about in terms of practical karate, and I really started looking at the self-protection side of things. and how it differs so much from what I've been doing up to that point, and haven't looked back since. And I currently run a club now that has multiple locations, and we're called Cotswold Karate School, and honestly couldn't be happier.
If by the end of this evening anyone's interested in taking a leaflet about Jack's Club, he is my current instructor, and so they do classes in Chipping Campden on a Monday,
That's the one.
Loughborough on a Wednesday, and Evesham on a Thursday. And if you've got any kids, or if you're interested in yourself, by all means come and have a chat to us at the end or during the break. So, this is what we're going to cover this evening. So, the talk is split into 3 parts, and I'm going to cover the first 2 parts pretty quick, because that's a little bit of sort of history about sort of like martial arts and the kind of stuff that you find in clubs up and down the country, and it's kind of stuff that Jack and I were doing up until a few years ago when we made this switch. The part 2 is where we get into the bit where that type of traditional sort of martial arts training falls down when it comes to self-defense scenarios. And then we're going to look at some of the ways that we can adapt it. So looking at some of the things that we've started to incorporate into our curriculum and to make it more functional and more practical. At that point, we're going to have a little break. And then the third part is focused solely on all the self-protection, self-defense stuff. And I suspect that that's the reason why most of you are really here. So what I would like to do is finish and basically open the floor up to questions. If you've ever found yourself in a confrontational situation, maybe felt that you didn't handle it well, by all means, Jack's got a wealth of experience. I'm still learning, but we'd be happy to give you whatever advice. If you just want to see us do some stuff, happy to have a go. Subject to, But if you've got to rush home for, get your dinner or whatever, that's fine. We'll look to try and wrap things up by about sort of 9ish, if that's okay. Yeah. Cool. So, just to be clear, right? I'm sure you all know from school days, this is a Venn diagram. Right, so, martial arts. So this circle on the left encompasses kind of stuff that Jack and I were doing up until a few years ago. So it's karate, it's judo, it's taekwondo, it's kickboxing, it's tai chi. Then you have, at the top, combat sports, right? So you can do karate as a sport, so you can compete. You can spar against people, you can win medals, win trophies, that kind of stuff. Is anyone familiar with mixed martial arts here? Has anyone seen MMA on the TV? Yeah. Believe it or not, to the uninitiated, it may look scrappy, but there are rules. There's certain things that they are not allowed to do. So you can't attack the groin, you can't attack the eyes, that kind of stuff. Okay. And then, this bit is the whole self-defense, self-protection. I, like Jack, tend to use the term self-protection because there's a lot you can do to protect yourself before resorting to physical violence. Okay? And in fact, that really ought to be a much larger circle. Now, just because you're good at one doesn't mean you're good at the other. Whilst they do have some common elements, each one of these requires different skill sets. Okay? I think the one thing that we can all agree on, though, is that in some way, shape or form, they all involve hitting people with varying degrees of violence.
Absolutely. I think the biggest thing for me with this map is understanding there's a different context for each one. And it's very easy, as somebody that doesn't do martial arts, to look at this and go, oh, they're all the same thing, because they're all hitting people. And it's one of those things where, unless you do these kind of sports, and unless you're all actively involved in them, you begin to see the differences. One of the best examples for me is mixed martial arts. You watch people, they're hitting each other. First thing they do, they grab them, throw them on the floor, and keep hitting them, and then eventually the ref will jump in and stop, put them away. If you do that in Wixford, okay, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. Okay, so although somebody might be fantastic at competing in a combat sport, it doesn't necessarily mean that they have good self-protection skills. It just means they're good at fighting. So there's a massive disparity in all those 3 subjects.
Right. Cheers, John. Thanks. So let's focus on some definitions. Let's try and clarify what a martial art is. So, when people think of the term martial arts, they tend to think of things that originated in the Far East, Japan, China, those kind of countries. So karate, Muay Thai, kickboxing, Kung Fu, all that kind of stuff. Right? It is a codified system, so there's a set of techniques. You can think of it as like a dictionary, like a reference book. So there's a set of techniques that defines your martial art. And when you cross-train in other martial arts, there may be some similarity, but they might be expressed in a slightly different way. There's generally some kind of structured training program that takes you from beginner up to varying levels of proficiency. In martial arts like karate and judo, that's most evident in the belt ranking system. So you start off as a beginner as a white belt, and you progress up through coloured belts up to black belt level. And karate never used to have that, but they stole it from judo. And it can include things like weapons such as swords, sticks. I have brought a variety of some traditional karate weapons along this evening. Unfortunately, I won't be demonstrating any of these because we've already got quite a lot to fit in, but if anyone is curious enough to want to come and take a look during the break or at the end, we've got some fairly serious looking things like these. And anyone know what these are? Nunchaku. But nunchaku in English. Now, by this definition, boxing is a martial art. So is wrestling. So is fencing. So was jousting back in the day. These were things that you had to practice in order to survive. Right? Every one of us sitting in this room this evening is descended from someone who had to fight for their life and protect themselves against an attacking tribe or whatever, or woolly mammoth, whatever, right? So we should be grateful to those guys. There are human cultures today in parts of Africa, Asia, where young boys even today have to prove that they can fight as a rite of passage from boyhood to adulthood. They are not new. Martial arts have been around, I would argue, for as long as humans have existed, really. This is a piece of wall art, a Minoan fresco on the island of Crete, dating from about 1600, 1700 BC, and it shows two boys, despite the long hair, but actually boys, wearing, well, they're naked except for a little loincloth that they're wearing here, and that is a rudimentary boxing glove, probably made from goat skin. So it's been around for a long time. You can find examples of martial arts in the hieroglyphics in the Egyptian pyramids. Now, there's lots of reasons why people take up martial arts, but not everyone who takes up martial arts stays with it, okay? So, by far, the biggest reason is it looks cool. People see, the likes of John Wick and Jason Bourne doing their stuff in the films and they think, I want to do that, I want to have a go at that. You might have a family member, an older brother or sister who does it, and so, you just sort of follow in their footsteps. I've been at clubs in the past where entire families, mum, dad and the kids, all train together because, as the parents would say, I'm sitting there for 2 hours anyway, while I'm watching, I might as well be up there taking part. It can be a good way to improve your health and fitness, and there's all kinds of benefits from cardio. If you're going to do something, why not do something that might be useful someday, rather than just running on a treadmill or.
That's one of the reasons. I know we're getting on to reasons for staying, but for me, that's one of my biggest reasons for staying as well. Is that I get bored doing other types of fitness sometimes, and hitting people is a really fun thing for me. So for me, just that movement, it just feels so much more natural. It feels like something I can enjoy for a longer period of time than being on a treadmill or being on a cross trainer, stuff along those lines.
I've certainly seen young kids at some of my previous clubs who, when they start, wouldn't say boo to a goose. And yet, because of the way that karate is structured, and because you have to communicate frequently with your partner, and in terms of letting them know what you're comfortable with and all that kind of stuff, actually their confidence grows. And I'm sure you've seen some transformations.
I see it all the time. It's fantastic. But generally, like, putting kids into situations where they're actually having to be physically involved with another child is, in my opinion, one of the best things you can do for your kids. All day at school these days, you're not allowed to wrestle, not allowed to touch each other, stay away from each other, not allowed to do that. And kids naturally, they want to fight, they want to wrestle, they want to do all those things, they want a rough house. And I encourage it. In our clubs, that's exactly what we get them doing. As soon as they start with us, wrestle, but we're going to be watching over you and making sure you're doing it safely.
Yeah. In a controlled
manner. Exactly, yeah, it's eyes out. But they get the opportunity to play and they get the opportunity to wrestle. When you look at any animal, it doesn't matter what it is, bears, tiger cubs, they will fight in the same way. They wrestle, they throw each other on the floor, they bite each other, we hopefully don't do that. But you get the idea though of it just builds their confidence with that physicality, and it means they're not scared of it, because when it comes to being at school, you get a kid that starts pushing them around. Yeah. They've experienced it in the dojo. They've experienced it when they've been playing with the other kids. Great. It means they're not scared of it.
Yeah, and that leads nicely on to some of the other reasons why people get involved. It's either because you've been involved in a situation, or you've got a kid who's getting bullied at school, and there's think, well, let's enroll them in a martial arts class, give them the confidence to be able to handle themselves. However, because of a lot of the ways that martial arts is taught, people think that they're going to become experts overnight. Within 6 weeks they're going to be leaping in the air doing spinning 360-degree kicks, and that just doesn't happen. I would take martial arts is a fairly long-term commitment, and I would put it on a par with learning a musical instrument or learning to speak a foreign language. It requires repeated effort over an extended period of time. And so for that reason, most of the people who take up martial arts don't stay with it beyond the first few months, really.
About 8 months, 7-8 months.
And part of the reason for that is in the early stages, there's often quite a lot of repetition. It's like there's certain basics that you have to learn. You tend to go over them time and time again. Part of mine and Jack's role as instructors is to try and make the lessons fun and engaging and not too repetitive, so that people want to come back and do something different the following week. Now, the reason why people stay involved in martial arts is, we already talked about the sport and competitive aspect. For some people, that's very rewarding. Line up your medals and trophies on the sideboard, that's all great. Health and fitness, obviously linked to that. People make friends, and so their social circle starts to revolve around martial arts. Big focus these days on mental health, and certainly that's an area where I know I benefit personally. There's a big thing these days about mindfulness, the ability to just disconnect from, whatever kind of day you've had a bad day at work or whatever, something's not gone right, get in the dojo, and within 5 minutes, forgotten about it. Mainly because I'm trying to avoid getting the...
That's very true. It's hard to think about
get
anything
people
else.
to a pulp like this guy. Yeah. Anyway.
Absolutely.
Some people go a little bit further. Japanese martial arts in particular, karate, kind of embodied this principle of like the Budo, it's called like the warrior mindset, and this is kind of like, it's a sort of, it goes beyond the physical skills and kind of embodies a set of like moral and ethical principles that kind of governs how you conduct yourself in everyday life. And it's all around this notion of sort of self-improvement, but not just self-improvement in fighting ability, but just, you can kind of equate it a little bit with the kind of the code of ethics that knights used to follow. Like there were certain rules of engagement, certain things that you were expected to do, either on the battlefield or off, and it's that kind of...
It's that kind of thing, but I'd argue just like the knights though, although people say they live by these rules, they often don't. Okay.
In essence, people get some kind of self-fulfillment through one or more of these aspects, and that's what keeps people coming back. It generally, there's no defined standard. It varies from club to club, but it generally takes somewhere in between about 4.5 to 5 years to get from beginner to black belt. If you go to a club and anyone promises you that they can do it in any less time than that, you know, like 12 months or whatever, stay well clear. That's all I'll say.
Yeah.
So, what does traditional martial arts training involve? Right. So, individual technique. So, Juliet, can I just borrow you for a second?
You said it was no borrow.
No.
You said one I'm scared.
No. I'd just like you to strike what you think is a typical karate pose.
I don't know. It's like that with one foot in front of the other.
And
Hands
yeah, that's
like that.
not too. This is quite often. Yeah, thank you very much. Give her a hand. Usually, when people think of karate, they tend to think of something just like Juliet's done there, like with one foot in front of the other, with hands in a kind of ready to do some kind of karate chop type technique. Okay. And it's true that in karate we do have some open-handed techniques, but for the most part we actually hit with our fists. Okay. We also have kicking, and I'll call them blocking techniques for now. But this is essentially, if something is coming towards you, if someone's trying to punch you or kick you, it's a way of deflecting that in order to gain some advantage that you can then hit them back. And there's also elements of grappling and throwing. That's generally where martial arts like judo and Brazilian jiu-jitsu and those kind of guys, they do a lot of that. Most karate clubs don't do it, but we do a bit in our club. Some focus on things like balance, coordination, flexibility, so often involves like lots of stretching exercises so that you can do those high kicks. Balance. Anyone remember the old Karate Kid movie from the 1980s? Remember when Daniel at the end was doing his, like, you know, that kind of physical conditioning now. This is where, do you remember the thing we did in Germany last week? Yeah.
Just about.
Should we do just the arms or arms and elbows?
Go on, let's do the elbows.
All right, okay. Right, so physical conditioning would look something like this. Now, I wouldn't expect anybody in this room to be able to do that straight off. And, you know, it's going to hurt and you're going to get bruised. But over time, your body toughens up. And the aim of this, and you can do kicking as well, the aim of this is to basically condition the body to be able to take a hit, essentially. So that if you do get hit in a fight, you know, just sort of bounces off you, essentially. Sparring. Now, sparring is where you get an opportunity to put into practice the techniques that you've learned in a one-on-one type scenario against an opponent. Now, as a beginner, in most martial arts clubs, the sparring tends to be quite rigid and quite formalised. Part of the reason for that is because it doesn't look good if people get hurt. Right. So what that might look like is, Jack, if you could step back in the right leg, Gidambarai kind of there. Right. So typically what would happen is Jack's going to step forward and do a punch towards my face. And again. And again. That kind of thing. Right. Now. Oh, thank you. Now, we don't do a lot of this in our club. Instructors who are in favour of this style of training believe that it teaches some good transferable skills, so reaction time, distance, control. So, you know, Jack would make sure that his punch sort of lands just about there or just before, so that he doesn't actually sorry, my watch just alerted me and said it looks like you've had a fall. But we believe that actually all that it serves to do is ingrain bad habits, because in reality, no one out there is going to attack you in that kind of way. Okay? As you progress up through the ranks, the sparring tends to be a little bit more sort of free flowing. So
So text one.
yeah, so we'll be moving around like this. Yeah. There we go. Back on it. Right. Oh, you just And the other thing that we do is forms. Now, in karate, that goes by the name kata. Kata is just the Japanese word for sort of means shape, pattern.
Yeah, pattern shape. That's it.
It's a choreographed sequence of moves, and you generally have to learn a new kata for each belt when you want to move up to the next rank. And they start off very simple, but at black belt level they get very complicated. So beginner level, typically about 20 moves or thereabouts.
Around that.
But there's some advanced black belt katas that go up to 50, 60 moves. And the only way to learn them is by constant repetition. Do you want a demo one?
Oh, I can demo if you want me to.
Because I've got a video of one, but we can skip past that if we demo one.
Yeah, sure. Demo.
Should we do Naihanchi? Take you
Yeah.
showdown.
Yeah, that'd be
right.
interesting. Yeah,
Right.
sure.
So Jack and I are going to do the same kata, but in Jack's background, he does it slightly different to how I do it. But there's some differences at the beginning, but you'll see some commonalities as we progress through.
I think it's.
Okay, yeah. So
If you
I'll
want
follow
to-
you because you've got the extra head movements at the
Oh,
start.
we've got a little bit more. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Good. Naihanchi.
Take a shodan.
Mid.
Yummy. So that's a kind of intermediate level kata that you would usually learn, sort of purple, brown belt level-ish.
Brown
Yeah,
brown
brown.
art club at least.
Yeah, it's unusual and it looks a lot different to a lot of the previous katas because it moves in this sort of straight line from side to side. And the eagle-eyed amongst you may have noticed that the moves are repeated on one side and then on the other side. And the reason for that is because someone might attack you from the right-handed side, someone might attack you from the left-hand side. In most cases, it's going to be from the right-handed side because most of the population is right-handed. But 10% of the population is left-handed, so we always practice both sides. So I'm gonna. This is an example of another one from the style that I do that would probably be the one that you would learn before the one we've just demoed there. Unfortunately, there's no sound. We've got some technical issues. It worked the other night when I came down, but the reason why I included this one is there's a particular sequence in here that I want you to pay attention to, and it's when the guy jumps up in the air. So. Which is coming up around now. So he hits his arm, he does something like that, he punches up in the air, jumps up in the air and lands like this. And that's it. There we go. Right, so we'll come back to that sequence a little bit later on. So, problem with a lot of this is generally doesn't prepare you for the type of situations you're going to encounter in the real world. And we'll look at what some of those are in a moment. Real life conflict is messy and unpredictable, and you've got no control over when or where it's going to happen. Okay? Criminals generally don't pick on people bigger than them, they pick on the weak and the vulnerable. Doesn't take other factors into account, such as something was to happen here, I haven't got the luxury of space, there's obstacles in the way, innocent bystanders, my exit might be blocked, all kinds of other things that I have to take into account in any given situation. Adrenaline is a big factor as well. So, adrenaline is a naturally occurring hormone produced by the adrenal gland in the brain, and the effect that that has on the body, if any of you have ever had to stand up in public and give a speech, you'll recognise it immediately. It's the quickening of the heart rate, it's the clamminess, and it's that fight or flight response, it's sometimes called. Okay? Now, what that does is your fists may clench involuntarily. You may start to sweat. Some people in this situation describe having heightened sensory awareness, so things like, they can suddenly hear things from like a long distance away, like as if their ears become finely tuned in to what's happening around them. Basically, your blood pressure goes up, you will become more immune to pain. So how many times have you ever been involved in a scrap with a brother or sister and found that you've got a cut and you didn't even know you got it? Or been out working in the garden and got a cut and not realised until you've got back in. The other thing that the other effect that adrenaline has on the body is it limits your ability to do fine movements. So let me give you an example. You know those fairground puzzles where you've got the bendy wire and the hoop and you have to move the hoop around? Imagine I've got a gun at your head and I say, do that now. What do you think the chances are that you would be able to do that successfully in that time? Exactly, you would be trembling.
Just to add on, for that exact reason,
Yeah.
when it comes down to these stressful situations, especially if you haven't had any training in dealing with stress responses and dealing with the change in adrenaline in your body, you panic. Like James said, you go to that fight or flight, and majority of people, if they don't know how to fight, they will go into flight. And unfortunately, it's not actually generally the best response in serious situations.
Yeah. As I said before, you've generally got no control over who your attacker or opponent is, and you have to account for differences in size and strength, particularly if you're a woman. And there's a whole legal, ethical framework that surrounds self-defense that is generally not taught at all. So if something happens to me out in the, out there in the real world, I have to be aware that I may be held to a greater degree of accountability because I've had martial arts training than a regular member of the public. So if I hit someone and I hurt them seriously, there's a very good chance that, I may still get in trouble with the police because I should have exercised more control or more judgment or sought some other way to resolve the situation without resorting to violence. Formulaic sparring scenarios. You saw an example of that a few minutes ago with the three-step stuff that Jack and I did. Again, totally unrealistic for what you're likely to encounter. And they ignore a lot of the psychological and verbal aspects associated with self-protection. Yeah. There's been a lot of scientific studies done into this. There is nearly always, in any kind of conflict, there's almost always some kind of escalation phase that goes on beforehand. So with me and Jack, there's generally what did you say about my mum?
It's bang and forward, I'm not having.
And what will happen at some point in this situation is chest gets puffed out. Right? This is very primate-like behaviour, by the way. This goes back to, right? And then there's usually this kind of, And normally what the trigger point is someone at some point will go, like that, and then boom. That's usually what happens. That's like lighting the blue touch paper, and then from then on, So, what are you likely to encounter in real life? By far the most common, certainly in male on male violence, it's punches. So, straight punch, swinging punches, this kind of stuff. Other open or closed-handed strikes, so slap, this kind of thing. Not so much the choppy sort of stuff. If you make your hand into a fist, this kind of thing, so hammer fist to side of the head, that kind of stuff. Kicks and knee strikes, headbutts, which again aren't allowed in MMA. Spitting, biting, hair pulling, going for the eyes. Our eyes are very important to us, and if something comes towards your eyes, well, one, if you've ever poked yourself in the eye, you know how flipping painful it is. And if something goes into the eyes, you will do almost anything to protect them, and whatever you've got hold of, you are bound to let go almost instantaneously. The groin, very sensitive area, particularly on men, but also on ladies as well. Trips, throws, and tackles. So, an attacker will generally try and get you on the ground. Can anyone think why? Any?
They can control you more.
Well, you're more vulnerable on the ground because it limits what you can do. So, chokes and strangulation. To most of you, you probably think those aren't the same thing, but there is a subtle difference. Not that I think if someone was doing either of these to you, you would care. But choking is cutting off the airway. Strangulation is when you cut off the blood supply to the brain at the side of the neck. Strangulation usually results in you falling unconscious within about 3 seconds. A choke will take a lot longer, about 30 seconds before you'll pass out.
But like one of the guys that we trained with in Germany recently was making a good point about this, that most people find chokes unbelievably uncomfortable and they will naturally panic and want to get out of it, whereas strangulation is just like you slowly, just the lights go out, you fade to black.
Bear hugs, so I'm sure you probably are aware of this, so that's there either with the arms outside or with the arms over. Headlock, anyone remember the thing at the playground, you get your head this way and sort of drag you around. Arm locks, anyone ever had that one where someone gets your arm up your back, that kind of way? There's lots of other ones as well. Wrist or lapel grab, so that's like this way, like come here, or this. So basically the idea is if I can get hold of Jack like this, what do you think is coming next? It's knee, head, smack, this kind of thing. So in any self-protection scenario, you do not want to let this happen at all, okay? And yeah, the shoving, pushing bit, that's usually part of the escalation phase at the start. And yeah, if you do go to the ground, there's a very strong likelihood that your attacker is going to find some way to get on top of you and just keep hitting them until you are in a pretty bad way. Or kick to the head, or throw something at you. Yeah, I know, it's all very nasty. So, what do we do about this? So, it turns out, funnily enough, that the best way to learn how to hit something, especially if you want to hit it hard, is to hit something hard. So, do you want to do the 1, 2, 3 with the palm, either hammer fist or elbow?
If I do 3 and then an out of it.
Yeah,
all
right.
right.
Right, yeah, again. Right, now, I don't know how that looked to you guys, but if that was my real head and not this, right, a couple of things to bear in mind. Jack probably fired off those 4 shots in under a second. Even if I saw the first one coming and was able to stop it, there's no way I'd stop number 2, number 3, number 4. I'd be on the ground. Or, at best, I'd be like, get off, get off, get off, and would be looking to get out of there. Okay. The other thing we look at as well is power generation as well. So we do a little bit of work with body mechanics, like understanding how we can use our hips to get more power into our techniques. It may sound counterintuitive, but a lot of that comes from relaxation. Very simple mathematical equation, Newton's second law of motion, force equals mass times acceleration. So, the energy that a moving object has is the direct product of its size, its mass, and how fast it is moving. Now, I cannot change the size of my hand, but I can change how fast it travels. If it's moving very slowly, it's not going to have any power at all. Moving quickly, it's going to hurt more. If I took a bullet, about that size, less than an inch long, and I threw it at someone here, well, it may hurt a little bit depending on where it hits you, but it's likely to bounce off and not cause any damage at all. But if it's fired from a gun at 500 miles an hour, different story. It'll pass right through you and cause a lot of damage on the way.
One of my favourite analogies for this, actually, is we call it throwing a punch. It's not, you don't just do a punch, you throw a punch. And it all comes down to the mechanics that go into throwing and the mechanics that go into punching. They're exactly the same. First thing I learned when we started doing things like the double hip, which we learned from a gentleman called Peter Constantine who lives up north, is that the hip needs to come first. And we do this naturally as humans, but we train ourselves out of it doing this really rudimentary
kind of
sort of martial art that we talked about. And you watch people throw a ball, the first thing that goes isn't the hand, the first thing that always goes is the hip, and then they throw. It's exactly the same as James is talking about when you throw a punch. The hip
It's
has
exactly
to go
the
first.
same technique that javelin throwers use as well. Leading hip, then the back hip, and it all transfers into energy to, in their case, throw the javelin further. In our case, it's so that we can hit harder. We also practice realistic attack scenarios. So we go back to that previous list. We do a lot of stuff that starts from swinging punches, especially on the right hand side. We do a lot of stuff that starts from like wrist grabs and this kind of thing as well, because in any conflict scenario, you will default to what you know. So what we do is we do these drills time and time again so that it becomes second nature. It becomes an almost instinctive response.
Absolutely. You don't rise to the level of your martial art, you fall to the level of your training. If your training doesn't do this stuff, you will never do it in any real life application.
Functional drills to reinforce good habits, right? So just do a straight punch.
Right hand?
Yeah, right hand. So I'm just going to parry that out of the way with my left hand. And in this little gap here, I'm going to pass my right hand up, move Jack's arm down, pin it to his body. That way this arm is immobilized and I only have to worry about this hand now. I'm going to go back to you and you're going to do the same. And then back. And just for fun, you might want to make it a swinging punch. Yeah. And you can even do an elbow.
Sorry. Yeah, bang, knock each other out.
And we can go as fast as we like, and we might even carry on a conversation while we're doing it, because by this time I'm not even thinking about it, I'm just doing it automatically. It's like a kind of muscle memory. There we go. Basically, in short, whatever comes into this space here, I have almost an instinctive way of responding to it. We do incorporate some throws, some groundwork, and also escaping. Very neglected part of self-defense. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. And this is the big thing where practical karate differs from the kind of stuff that you see going on in other clubs up and down the country. So, I want to take you back to that video that you saw before with the guy doing the kata where there was a sequence that kind of, he sort of did something like this, and he came round and hit his arm, and then he does something like this, then he goes up, comes up, jumps in the air, and does something like that. Do you remember seeing that in the video? Now, when I was first taught this kata, however many years ago it was, the official explanation for what that sequence represented, right, from my instructor, who probably got the same explanation from his instructor and the instructor before him, was that someone is attacking me from this direction, and I want to stop that guy in his tracks. So I come in close and I say, let's rhyme and say, I strike down on his nose. And then I punch under his chin, and at that point, I become aware, somehow, through some sort of Spider-Man sense, that there's something going on behind me. Someone's emerged out of the shadows. So I've dealt with this guy now, and I now turn my attention to this attacker who's coming from this way. And Jack, depending on the version your instructor was told, has either got a long stick, like one of those, or in some versions, a samurai sword, and for no reason decides to swing that at my legs, right? So I jump up. In the process of that, it flies out of his hands, and so for want of anything better to do, he decides he's going to kick me, and I just go like that. And that block is somehow powerful enough to break his leg and deal with him. Right? Now, even at the time, I was very sceptical that some Japanese martial arts master would go to the trouble of devising a sequence of moves to cater for that very, very niche scenario. And certainly, if I found myself in any situation where someone's coming at me with a samurai sword, I can tell you, my kata would look very simple, and it would be like that, and I would run out of that door. And I would probably question the life choices I've made along the way that got me into that situation in the first place. What I think, I think there's various interpretations, but what we think that sequence probably represents is, I've got the guy here, I've got hold of his jacket, I come up, I throw him in a judo style kind of way, and in fact there is a throw in judo that looks exactly like this. I throw him around, that's why I turn my head. It's not because there's somebody behind me, because that's the direction he's going to go and end up on the floor. And when he's on the floor, I step over him, I pin him down with my knee, and I grab his lapels and apply the choke. That to me seems a more plausible explanation for what that represents. And we do that with all the katas that we learn. Yes,
Absolutely.
we also test under pressure. So we'll come up with scenarios, we'll do it slow, we'll walk through the steps of the kata, and then we'll ramp it up. Your partner will be less than compliant, shall we say. So they'll put in a little bit of resistance, they may even do a little bit of sort of fighting back, and then we look to see what works and doesn't work once the pressure levels start to ramp up. And what you find is that generally, as things ramp up, it starts to look less clean, it looks more messy, it looks more scrappy, it looks more like a real fight.
Yeah.
Because that's exactly what real fights are like.
I find it funny, like if you were to walk into our session right at the beginning, you'd be like, oh yeah, this looks like karate. By the end, you'd be like, oh my god, what happened? Who got upset? Yeah.
Right. Developing controlled aggression. What's the best way to demo this? I think a volunteer might be needed for this. Is there anyone who would like to stand up for a second? Anyone? Katie, come on. Right. Okay, we're at a party, right? I'm some guy who's come up to you, I've tried some cheesy chat-up line on you, maybe made some inappropriate remarks, and you want to teach me a quick lesson and give me a slap across the face. Now what Katie just did is what we call the soap opera slap. That's the, you rotter! Right, no, give it some money, go on. Okay, that was better. Right. Close your eyes. Right. What's the thing you love more than anything in the whole world? Ralph the cat, okay? Right, oh, I've got bad news for you, Katie.
Oh God.
Because I've done some bad things to Ralph the cat. I've hurt him really bad, and he's meowing and crying. Right?
Pretty angry with me.
You're pretty angry with me. Good. That's exactly what I want, right? Right. What would you like to do to the person that's hurt Ralph? I wouldn't want to know, right? When you're in your eyes, look me in the eyes and hit the pad again. There. Right. Give it a slap. Give it a slap.
Slap or punch?
Slap. Again. Again. Right, there. There was a noticeable difference, right? Right. Thank you very much. Right. You're back in the room. What that was trying to demonstrate is that in a fight, I need to somehow summon up. I need to go from mild-mannered James, who's just going about his business, to the James who's going to do bad things to you, right? So I'm like, in an instant I can go, if you so much as lay a finger on me, and I use that, and I channel that into my techniques.
Yeah, I do exactly the same thing. And it's quite interesting. Based on my experience, people that are good at doing that are generally probably the most calm people you know.
Yeah.
And I think it's because they have an outlet for it.
Yeah.
They have an outlet for their aggression. They have all that pent-up stuff they have. As an example, the pad was a perfect example. You can really just go, let it go, and then you just finish the session. Oh, I had a really nice time tonight. And you just walk away, and everything just goes.
Yeah, it is a skill that can be
Yes,
trained.
absolutely.
It doesn't come naturally to us because most of us are, frankly, nice people and don't want to hurt anybody. Right, that concludes parts 1 and 2, so thank you for listening so far. Go and get
Can we have a look at the sword?
Yes.